Good evening and welcome. This is a public hearing of the Plan Commission of the City of Evanston. The zoning ordinance directs this body to conduct public hearings for plan developments, map and text amendments to the zoning ordinance, and to make recommendations regarding long-term zoning and planning for the city. This commission will make a record and recommendation to send to the City Council, the determining body in these matters. Will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Halleck?
Here.
Commissioner Hugo?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Here.
Commissioner Linwall? She is recusing herself.
She's recused from this. With 5 members present, we do have a quorum, and the meeting is hereby called to order. Also present from staff tonight are Neighborhood and Land Use Planner Megan Jones, and I believe Assistant City Attorney Brian George is online.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you, sir. This is a formal hearing. This is a formal meeting, and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time, so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the board regarding any matter on the agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Commissioners may ask questions at any time. Our procedure is to hear from staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant. Next, persons who wish to make a statement regarding the matter may do so at that time. Any person with a legal interest in property located within 1,000 feet to the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses. Public testimony is limited to 2 minutes per speaker under the Commission's rules. When all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the Commission will close the record and begin deliberations. No further questions or testimony will be received from the applicant or the public once the record is closed. All testimony will be under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony or statement to your personal knowledge. When you address the Commission, please state your name and address and sign in on the provided sheet, which we have nobody here in person, so we'll keep a record of that through the Zoom recording. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you're at a microphone, that you have been recognized so that we can hear you through this technology, and know that you will be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. We have one item on the agenda this evening, which is a continuation of the matter of 1900 Sherman Avenue. Is the applicant online?
Yes, the applicant is online.
Thank you. Bear with me because I can only see whoever is speaking up on the screen, so I can only see one person at a time. With that, we will move into our agenda. The first item tonight is the approval of our minutes from October 13th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Moved by Hugo. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Westerberg. Is there any discussion, anything that needs to be edited or changed? Hearing none, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Halleck?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Hugo?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the minutes are approved. With that, we move into our old business, which again is the continuation of 21 PLND 0076, a major adjustment to the plan development at 1900 Sherman Avenue. A reminder to everyone basically that the applicant is requesting a major adjustment to the plan development in regards to the site allowances, which would decrease the number of dwelling units from 168 to 152, decrease in number of below-grade parking spaces from 37 to 25, and a decrease in zoning height from 172 feet 8 inches to 168 feet 4 inches. A continuance was granted by this body so that we could allow for rebuttal of testimony from the applicant in regard to parking. Our policy is that we will call on the first three people who had requested the continuance to allow them to address the board first. So with that, on my sign-up sheet, I see Cecile McHugh is first. Is Ms. McHugh with us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. If you'd like to go ahead and speak, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I've timed myself at 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I hope that works. And I've cut
That's
down a
fine.
little bit.
With so few people, I'm not going to hold us to a real strict timeline, but you know, try to keep it as short as you can. Thank you.
Thanks. I won't speed up that fast then. All right. Well, my name is Cecile McHugh. I live within 1,000 feet of 1900 Sherman. This parking plan for this proposed development is not adequate. The proposal is for 3 new parking places for 152 new units. City staff determined that 88 parking spaces were needed. The proposal is for 3. The city states that this is within a site development allowance because apparently any amount of parking, even no parking at all, is within a site development allowance, and recommends long-term leasing. City staff calculated 88 spots would be needed using its own TOD recommendation for 0.55 spaces per bedroom, close to E2's actual parking utilization of 0.59 spaces per unit. HACC's analysis of the required parking, however, uses a weighted average of the parking utilization at E2 and the link. Including the link into the comparison is invalid because the link is essentially an NU student dorm whose residents have little need for cars. I've heard HACC imply that reducing the number of units from the original plan, the approved plan, by 16 and reducing the net new parking spaces from the approved plan by 12 is roughly comparable to the approved plan, but this is not so. The approved plan has a net new parking space for 9% of the new units. The proposal has a net new parking space for 2% of the new units. I want to repeat that, for 2% of the new units. This drastic reduction doesn't even yet take into account that more parking would be required for visitors, caretakers, and staff. It's reasonable to expect that on-site parking will be available for the lifetime of the development, not the case for leased off-site parking. It's public information that Focus, the developer of the link, has been in discussion with Sherman Gardens to purchase the Sherman Gardens parking lot. It seems likely that a later new Focus development and expansion of the link would want the parking leased to the Emerson. What then? E2 is too far from the Emerson, especially for seniors, dangerous in the snow. There are 2 blocks, 1,200 feet, between the 2 buildings over the city's 1,000 feet recommendation for off-site parking. Seniors at the Emerson would have to cross an alley, a driveway used for garbage pickup, and 3 streets and walk to their actual space on the huge E2 lot. No one benefits if a mega development is allowed to be built without adequate parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McHugh. Second on my list of speakers, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Claire Wastel? Wastel?
Good evening. Yes, Wastel is correct.
All right, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I live within 500 feet of the Pearlman, and I rebut the applicant's claim that their parking is adequate and accessible. On page 42 of tonight's packet, the Evanston zoning analysis states that parking is non-compliant and specifies a net increase of 88 spaces is required. Page 74 contains the applicant's own newer analysis specifying 101. Yet only 39 are to be provided on site for the combined buildings, 14 on the alley, 25 below ground. A net increase of 3 spaces, serving a net increase of 152 units, which is 3% of that city requirement. The applicants claim they can provide the missing 62 spaces at a nearby building. Yet on October 13, their language was still vague in discussions with the link and an understanding with E2. E2 does not meet the distance requirements in the approval ordinance on page 149. Item number 10 requires the minimum of 50 parking spaces be within 1,000 feet. And the DAPA recommendation on page 16 states the number of parking spaces to be leased within 1,000 feet of the property is increased to offset this loss in underground parking. E2 is 1,500 feet away, which leaves only the link. Their website states they are student living and they have parking for the exclusive use of the link residents. They advertise a security system that includes electronic key access to all entrances. Both seem to be barriers to procuring 62 parking spaces for seniors and their guests coming from different buildings. The applicant study shows the affordable units in the new building will need 6 spaces. Yet on October 13, the applicant stated that the affordable units would not be able to afford their parking. Will the Housing Authority pay for these 6 spaces, and will they include them in the in-building parking? On page 14, city staff determined the underground handicap spaces do not meet the size requirements of the Illinois Code. The current configuration only allows enough space to fully accommodate 1 accessible spot. For the needed 101 spaces required, the Illinois Code requires 5 accessible spaces. 2 are to be on the alley, therefore 3 will be needed below ground, and the applicant will need to reconfigure since accessible spaces cannot be outsourced to other buildings. At the September 8th meeting held at 1900 Sherman, several Pearlman residents asked questions which weren't fully answered. Please keep their quality of life in mind as you make decisions. Pearlman residents asked, where will the staff park? Is that going to be 3 of our 14 spaces on the alley? And how many will be taken by the staff at the new building? Caretakers have limited time. Won't parking further away make it even harder for them to help us? Families bring me groceries. Are they really going to have to carry them from a different building? Will the tall building blocking the corner and more traffic, will it be safe to walk from the Pearlman's back door across the alley to the 7-Eleven using my walker? In closing, the applicants labeled the further reduction of on-site parking as a, quote, refinement, but it was never a 1-to-1 ratio, and it is now to be 25 to 152 without adequate accessibility. Thank you for taking the time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Wastill. And our third speaker who had filed a continuance from the last meeting was Bruce Einenbach.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Thank you.
My name is Bruce Einenbach. I live at 723 Emerson, within 1,000 feet. I'm disturbed by the actions, or more precisely, the inaction of this commission. So here's what happened. The developer decides what is to be under consideration, writes it up, and submits it to staff. Staff, in turn, accepts what the developer wishes to have under consideration without question and passes the same on to the Plan Commission for its consideration. The Plan Commission then will only consider what staff puts forth, which really means what the developer has put forth. That is, what the developer wants to be under consideration. And the Plan Commission then considers nothing else. Accordingly, the Plan Commission is acting subservient to the developer via the subservient staff rather than appropriately the other way around. And it closes its eyes on anything else which might be of significant import to the project. Summarily, the tail is wagging the dog. The developer is controlling the conversation. The developer is driving the bus rather than the other way around. Consequently, nothing of substance was discussed at Plan Commission last time. The important stuff was deemed, quote, off topic, unquote, because the developer did not wish to talk about it. I can only consider that a dereliction of duty by this commission. At least two very important considerations, which should be reviewed by the commission, have been ignored. The 2 important and relevant to the responsibilities of this commission are an inappropriate C1A zoning. C1A, quote, is a commercial mixed-use district and intended to provide locations for the development of a mixed-use building consisting of retail-oriented and office uses on the ground level and office uses and or residential dwellings location above, unquote. This project is not a mixed-use project. It has no retail component. It is not C1A. This is an R6 project and accordingly must be reconsidered and set under that zoning. Additionally, the serious structural issue which should be noted and strongly recommended to council to require a thorough and independent review of a serious structural situation prior to any approval by this council. These issues are under the purview of the Plan Commission and can and should be addressed by it. To do otherwise is to shirk your responsibilities. To wit, and I quote, "This commission addresses matters relating to planning, physical development, zoning, building conservation, preservation, housing, and relocation. This commission," quote, "conducts public hearings for plan developments, zoning ordinance, map and text amendments, and unique use application," and it goes on. Now, I do really appreciate the often very hard work that this commission performs and find it very disheartening that what it does a lot is too often reversed so blatantly by our council. This commission can and does do very good and valuable work for our city. And although this is indeed an unusual situation, with all due respect, this commission has not done it here. It has failed our city. Please do your job. Our city is depending on you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Einenbach. I also have Kira Kelly has signed up to speak. And Ms. Kelly, you were not at the last meeting, if I am correct, so I will ask you to be sworn at this particular moment, if you're there.
Sorry about that. Yes.
That's fine. Thank you. If you would raise your right hand, which I cannot see, so I'll trust you on that.
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
Yes, I do.
And if you'd please state your name and address for the record.
Kira Kelly, 2436 Orrington Avenue.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. And if you'd like to make your statement.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to address the inaccurate premise and the comps that were used here to get this very, very low number of estimated the parking needs and the low number of spaces that this proposal is offering. For this building of 268 units, including 152 new, mostly market rate units added, they estimate they only need a total of 83 spaces for residents, 23 for guests, and 3 for staff, for a total of 101 units. 39 spaces will be on site and they will lease the rest. I'd like to, let's see, sorry. I had a little computer problem here. Yes, the developers and parking consultants cite comps of similar buildings nearby and show their math to draw such conclusions, but these are not comps of similar buildings, like another luxury 55 plus senior living, like the Avador built a block or two away, or even a senior affordable housing building that was just built on Howard. Nope, they are basing their very low parking space estimate on 2 primarily Northwestern college student occupied buildings. The Link, which is marketed as, on their splash page, the first page, as, quote, luxury student living in Evanston, Illinois. I live pretty close by, and it's basically a private dorm for Northwestern undergrads. And even they use 61 spaces. And the other building is E2, a building that's predominantly Northwestern Kellogg students, and they use 178 spaces. You can see this from that it is a Kellogg, primarily Kellogg building, when the first 5 reviews that you see, if you Google this, and I quote, "There's literally hundreds of Kellogg students here. Great for Kellogg students," and it's primarily clubs and parties on site. So I wonder, how on earth is a developer allowed to use a college undergrad building and a college graduate building with students who live a stone's throw away from the campus, which is the nucleus of their lives? And how are they using it as a basis to calculate parking needs for a luxury senior building with rents up to $3,600? I believe that the Plan Commission should insist on looking at the Avador, which again is very similar. It has 139 parking spaces for 167 units, and it does have 10% affordable housing units, or at least look at the ratio of the market rate units there. Or look at the 60-unit affordable housing building just built on Howard that has 55 parking units for 60 units. And I like to know, if seniors in affordable housing buildings don't drive, then why were so many spaces approved there? Another point, the calculation of the affordable housing parking spaces for this building may not be accurate as they are based on the Pearlman, which I believe is less than 50 AMI. Yet the the affordable housing units at this new building will be either 50% AMI, but they'll also be 80 to 120% AMI. So it's not accurate really to look at the Pearlman situation and take those same percentages. If you even just have common sense, 6 spaces for 51 new units just doesn't, for affordable housing units and middle income units, just doesn't seem accurate. I also noticed it was interesting at the same time the developer in the proposal is saying the residents of the building their parking needs, because they are seniors, won't be, they think it'll be even less, yet they are touting 64 bike spaces in public transport. So when we're talking about parking spaces, we're giving the assumption that the seniors won't be driving and aren't as active, but we're supposed to believe these same seniors are going to be riding bikes and taking the L. So it just seems, there's a I don't know. In conclusion, I believe these estimates are inaccurate and even misleading. And I just wonder how this happened. How are we using a dorm and looking at and calling it a trend? And us residents will have to live with the consequences of this forever. So I asked the Plan Commission in the city to reject the parking proposal here, and in the future not allow these kind of inaccurate comps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Was there anyone else? Those were the 4 names that I had on the sign-up sheet. Is there anyone else, if they would raise a hand so Ms. Jones can see them?
I believe there is somebody actually still in the waiting room waiting to be allowed into the meeting. Megan, if you can check on that.
Oh, no, I let them in. That's been
Oh,
handled.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got one hand raised from Sue Lowellbach.
All right, Ms. Lullabach, I also believe you were here at the last meeting. Did you speak, I'm sorry, were you sworn at the time?
I was sworn at the time. I did not speak.
Right.
And your normal time for speaking is after you've had time for discussion, I believe. If it's possible, I would just as soon speak at that point.
Well, things are working a little differently since this is a continuance.
Okay.
So the applicant is not making their case. The people who have requested the continuance get to respond first. If you'd like me to ask the applicant to respond to those statements and then make your statement, I'm willing to do that.
That would be great. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So is that the only hand that we had?
So now, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't find the hand button, but are there usually questions that can be asked?
We're going to let the developer respond to the statements that have been made right now. So it's their chance to kind of rebuttal, and then we'll kind of see how it goes from there. As I've said, continuances are a little bit different than our normal operating procedure. Because normally the applicant goes first, everyone asks their questions, makes their comments, and then the applicant rebuts. But with the continuance, the persons requesting the continuance actually get to go first.
Okay, so there'll be questions.
So if you have a specific question, just raise your hand, and I'll ask Ms. Jones to sort of keep an eye for hands that get raised at that time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, I will ask Mr. James if he would like to respond to the comments that have been made.
Yes, I will respond to comments made about parking because that is the topic under consideration at this continuance. I would like to make a summary statement prior to the Plan Commission vote on all 3 requested major exceptions. We have heard a lot of comment here tonight regarding parking and frankly, some other matters that are off topic. As well intentioned as these comments may be, they are made by, I will just say non-experts, people who have no particular qualification in parking demand analysis, parking utilization analysis. We have such an expert. The consultant who prepared our traffic and parking study, which was updated prior to the filing of our application for these three major adjustments. Dan Brinkman from the engineering firm Gould Hamilton Associates is with us, and I would like him. We actually presented some testimony to Megan Jones with respect to sources of data for Gould Hamilton's analysis, and that is part of the record and is available to planning commissioners for their review and deliberation. I would like Dan just to summarize the methodology of his analysis and his recommendation for parking demand at the proposed development. Dan, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Brinkman, before you begin, I just want to swear you in. So if you would just raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
I do.
Thank you. And if you would please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dan Brinkman. I'm with Gould Hamilton Associates. Our corporate address is 625 Forest Edge Drive, Vernon Hills, Illinois.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we were provided two different nearby or adjacent, in the case of Link buildings, that the Housing Authority had already had preliminary discussions with in terms of sharing parking or leasing future spaces or making future agreements regarding spaces. Given that those are, buildings in the vicinity, we used information, talked to operators at both of them to determine the demand for the new building based on market rate spaces. So we came to an estimated demand of 101, as stated by, I don't remember who, but it is a little higher than the number that staff calculated at 88. I don't think that, we didn't hide anything or say anything, in our analysis. The proposal, the number of spaces on site will not meet the demand. It only functions if off-site parking spaces are available to meet the demand of the building. We estimate somewhere between, whether it's 0.42 or 0.5 spaces. Not everyone will have a car, not everyone will have two cars, some people will not. We did also include the estimate for visitor parking in accordance with, the city's ordinance. So, I'll stand by our analysis and our recommendation that the site itself is underparked and that will rely on leased spaces in adjacent or other nearby buildings to meet the difference between what can be provided on site and in the alley and what the ultimate demand for the building is.
And Dan, do you think that the parking utilization information that you receive from the operators of the E2 building and the Link building are in fact comparable properties and are useful in projecting the parking demand at this subject site?
Market rate buildings in the neighborhood, is a dorm building a perfect analogy for this building? Probably not, but I'm sure that demand is accurate in terms of what they're using. Maybe even a benefit that the fact that there are more spaces available in the closer proximity at Link than E2. Mm-hmm. But this is what we have to work with. These are similar demands, and we want to make sure that if we are dealing with potentially leasing or coming to agreements with spaces, in other buildings, that we don't overtax those buildings as well. So we have to understand what their demand is and how ours relates to it.
Okay. Dan will be available if commission members wish to question him directly on his study and projection of demand. What I would like to say is that this particular continuation is for the purpose of addressing the parking question. There was a request to continue the meeting to provide rebuttal to our testimony. We've heard that. Well, I would like to say, point out a couple of facts. So what is relevant to this proceeding is only the deviation that we're requesting from the approved plan development ordinance. Okay, the plan development ordinance required 51 parking spaces in consideration of everything. Okay, we are, after additional consideration and due diligence, have discovered a need to modify the structural design of the new building to separate it from the existing Pearlman building, and therefore we must redesign that underground parking, and it will yield 12 fewer parking spaces. That is what we are requesting approval from the city for, and consideration also of the 16 units we are deleting from the program. So we will have 16 fewer spaces and are asking for 12 fewer parking spaces. Given that utilization rate of parking in nearby buildings is 0.5 spaces or thereabouts per unit, that is 1/2 parking space per unit. Our deletion of 16 units would more than compensate for the reduction of parking of 12 spaces. In addition, at the time of the original approval of the project and the plan development ordinance, we had presented evidence that we had a letter from the E2 building offering to lease 50 spaces to us. That was accepted as evidence of enough off-site parking to compensate for the lack of on-site parking, which we understand and accept is a non-compliant point in our proposal. Since that time, we have engaged with operators of the Link building who have indicated to us, and Dan has confirmed this through his conversations with the operators of the Link building, that they have up to 70 spaces that they could lease to us. So there is more than enough capacity in nearby buildings, plus our on-site parking to accommodate the need here. I don't think there's any question that there is. And the fact that existing buildings were way overparked to begin with was a major factor in the city and the city council approving our plan development with the 51 spaces that we had for that approved plan. So we are asking merely for a further reduction in 12 spaces to be compensated for by additional off-site parking, which is available right across the alley. This is an elderly building. There's not going to be a direct comp to our building, right across the street. I'm not sure the Abador is a direct comp. We have 30% affordable in our building. I don't know that the Abador has 30% affordable in their building. So there will not be an absolutely perfect comp to base things on. I think the fact that there is ample existing off-site parking to provide for more than our need for parking here on this property is what is most important, and that plus the expert witness testimony of Dan and the report that we filed provides evidence of what our parking will be. The zoning ordinance demand would be 88 spaces. Dan projected a maximum need of 101. We can provide for that with our on-site spaces and lease off-site spaces, and we've provided evidence of that. So we see that plus the reduction in 16 units in our building leads me to conclude that there would be no off-site impacts related to this reduction in 12 spaces, and there is no really public purpose for denying this major adjustment. So that would be our rebuttal to the testimony provided, and we'd be happy to answer questions from commission members.
Thank you, Mr. James. At this point, do any of the commissioners have questions? And I'm just going to ask you, instead of raising your hand, commissioners, if you would just kind of start talking, because I can't see who is.
I have one question for Mr. Brinkman. Just a question. Did you have a chance to check the ratio of parking spaces to residents at any of the other retirement communities in Evanston, such as Three Crowns or Presbyterian Homes or the Mather or the Avador or anything else in Chicago itself?
As part of this, no, I did not specifically contact any of the other uses. I have, considerable experience and worked on a number of other, variety of different types of senior living. But no, I didn't. I reached out to the two, the Link and E2. Those were the only properties I contacted as part of this study.
Understood. Thank you.
I just wonder if you could just clarify, if I remember correctly, the residents in the new development would not be eligible to receive on-street parking permits. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Any other questions from commissioners? I'll then turn to Ms. Lullabach if she'd like to make a statement.
Yes, I would. So I'm Sue Lolbach. I work at Connections for the Homeless in Evanston and head up a coalition called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. We have several people from Joining Forces on the call tonight, but we just have one request, which is that we ask the Plan Commission tonight to quickly support the changes requested by the Housing Authority of Cook County. In addition to the Housing Authority's partners on this project, city community development staff have already vetted these changes and feel that they're well within reason. Every one of the changes requested should make this building equivalently or more acceptable to those who have raised objections related to the building size and the parking. However, Evanston's code and processes require an unusual number of reviews and approvals, and that is why we were here 2 weeks ago, had the project delayed, and are here again tonight. We ask you to quickly bring this to a close, approve the requests for changes, and let this issue move forward so that we can get these 51 units of affordable housing in place as soon as possible, because people are waiting for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lullabach. I believe Ms. Kelly, and I'll clarify Kira Kelly, because I don't know if the alderman is on the call as well. So I believe you also said you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I did. Thank you. One question, I had a couple, but it was mentioned, foreseeing a lot of caregivers for seniors living there, and as also happens currently with the Pearlman. And it was mentioned that the developer was going to pay for parking for the caregivers. And I wondered if that was going to be in writing, because I can imagine that that's, could be quite an expense. If somebody has a caregiver coming, once or twice a day, how that works with the leasing of the spaces at Link and E2, and how long that, is that in perpetuity? Is there a limit to that? So that's my question on that front. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. James, or
Yes.
I don't know who would like to respond to that from your team.
Yes, so let me just say that the Housing Authority has made a statement that they would reserve spaces in the Link building, that they would lease spaces in the Link building for caregivers. I do not know, and Dan, do you have a projection of peak demand for parking from caregivers at this time?
We don't specifically have caregivers. We did consider
Visitors are different.
We consider visitors
Yeah.
in our demand. So 23 visitor spaces is part of that 101 peak.
Okay, so I would ask if Alicia Hershaw or Rich Minacchio have an estimate of how many spaces would be needed for caregivers. I believe both of them are on the line. I know Rich.
Go ahead, Rich. Well, I was just going to say that we don't have that number.
Excuse me, if you could just mention your name so that it's for the record.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Richard Minacchio. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. We don't have that number, but I did make the commitment that we wouldn't make the caregivers come out of pocket for expenses if their parking was not covered by the agency. So that is a commitment we made. I'm going to honor that commitment, but in terms of the numbers, I don't know, but as we just heard, the total number of parking spots included visitors, which also includes caregivers. So I don't have any doubt that there's going to be ample spaces, and we won't make the caregivers come out of pocket for that.
Okay, thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
I guess my question was if that was going to be in writing.
It can be a condition that the Plan Commission makes in its motion.
I had one more question for the parking consultant, and I wondered if typically in an undergrad housing situation, if the needs, or if the car ownership and parking needs are equivalent to a typical luxury building or even luxury senior building, if that is, yeah, what you see in terms of rates of cars and parking in a undergrad dorm type situation, and if that is equivalent.
There's honestly not a ton of published information regarding undergraduate dorms and parking demand, nor is there a lot of detailed published parking information for, you basically have parking demands for apartments or assisted living. There's even very little published information about affordable units. So you kind of use what's in the area. By and large, apartments, regardless of size, even regardless of affordability, when you talk about a building that's over 5 to 6 stories, parking demand per unit is generally around that half to 3/4 of a space per unit, based on national standards. So I don't have specifics about student dwellings other than my own anecdotal experience in renting spaces for my daughter at college. But there's not a ton of published information. So that's why the local data is as good as you can get, really.
Thank you. I see that Ms. McHugh has raised her hand, if that's correct.
That's true. I was wondering if I could rebut the rebuttal of our rebuttal. So a couple of things just quickly. It's not comprehensive, but I want to point out some errors in math, and also the fact that mainly it's not in question that this is a student dorm, and this is something that people who live right in the area know versus the experts. How would you know? You don't live here. We live there. We see them. We pass them. You can see their faces in the window. Everybody knows in the whole neighborhood that that is a student dorm, okay? And there is a very different utilization of parking by students who live 2 blocks from their university than there is in a TOD in general, all right? What's at E2? The utilization there matches the city's recommendation for 0.55 or whatever it is, units per parking places per unit. And so that validates that E2 is much closer. I myself was not aware of how many students that live there until right now because it's a little further away. But I rely on Kara Kelly having that inside information there. But still in all, it matches the city's recommendation of 0.55 parking places per TOD unit. In addition, I want to say that it was stated that this analysis by whomever it was, Mr. Brinkman or his company, was asking for more units than the city said was required. That's absolutely not the case. The city said that, and that was not Mr. Brinkman who said that, but I believe Mr. James, the city said that 88 additional units were required in addition to what's there already, which is approximately, I might be off by 1 or 2, but 22 spots and 16 additional ones on the side. So the city was saying that we needed 88 plus 38, 126 units, and Mr. Brinkman and company's analysis comes up with 101. All right. Now, in addition, Mr. James said that by reducing the number of units by 16 and reducing the parking places by 12, you're more than compensating in the reduction of units. I'm sorry, your math is wrong. And I'm going to state my credentials being a mathematics and computer science major. It's not that I have no credentials. Your math is absolutely wrong. I stated that in what I said, and not only that, but you threw around the fact that if there were 16 units reduced, and if you were only providing for one parking place for every 2 units, that you've more than compensated. Well, you did the math incorrectly, and you have less than compensated for that. And let's see if I can find that. I think it's yes, 6.4. If you reduce the number of units by 16, and you've only planned that 0.4 of them have a parking spot, you've reduced the required number of parking spots by 6.4, would be comparable to what was proposed, but instead what you're proposing is reducing the number of units of parking places by 12. Okay? So check your math.
Thank you, Ms. McKeel.
Check your math.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. James, just a second. I want to make sure, do we have any other hands up?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. James, if you'd like to respond to that, and then I will let you go into your final wrap-up rebuttal.
Okay, thank you so much. So, again, the question of parking demand, parking utilization is going to vary from building to building. The Housing Authority has said that they will help all residents. Well, first of all, they will make sure that all residents of the Pearlman building who have a car will be provided a space free of charge, either on site or in the Link building. That's number one. The residents of the new Emerson building will need to purchase parking, whether it's in the underground facility on site or in an adjacent building. And it's in the owner's interest to facilitate the location, securing those additional off-site spaces to accommodate the needs of its residents. And that will be done, and there is ample off-site parking in the area to accommodate this. So the question of whether there is enough parking in the area to handle off-site parking demand is really not in question. The fact that this is an elderly building, I believe, would further reduce utilization. The fact that this is a TOD area further reduces utilization. But regardless of what the actual utilization and demand is, there is enough off-site parking in existing buildings to handle that demand. And that was the basic premise of the approval of this project by the City Council back in November of 2020. So the request for reduction of 12 spaces is whether it's offset, regardless of how much is offset by the reduction of 16 units, is really not consequential. What is consequential is that there is adequate off-site parking facilities by buildings that have vastly overbuilt parking and do not need that parking. Some of the spaces that are leased in the E2 building are undoubtedly leased by people who don't even live there. So that utilization number is probably a little skewed. We don't have the actual information on how many residents lease spaces versus non-residents who lease spaces. But this all is very difficult to precisely project in any case. There is adequate off-site parking spaces. That was the basic premise of the approval of the project as originally approved, and the reduction in 12 spaces with a reduction in 16 units doesn't materially change that that consideration and that approval, in our opinion.
Thank you, Mr. James. With that, I will go ahead and close the record, and the commission will begin its deliberation. Is there anyone from the commission who would like to share a statement, or I can go first or last, it doesn't matter, if somebody else has something they'd like to say.
I'll begin with just to briefly say that I have no problem with approving the change in dwelling units or the height. The parking was a difficult issue when this project was first brought up, and it continues to be that way. I mean, when you go online and you try to find what is the right percentage of parking spaces to senior citizens, it's a little hard to figure out. There is no exact formula, and I can understand trying to find different ratios can be difficult. I think the applicant is trying to provide parking options. The problem is when they're not on site. I think there's a natural fear among the neighbors that basically what will happen is that if people find out they have to go 3 blocks to park somewhere and then walk back to the building, they'll take the path of least resistance and they'll park in the neighborhood, and they'll take the spaces there on the street. So I think part of the question for me is how solid are the agreements with some of these buildings to lease spaces? How long-term will those agreements be? How will the building operations folks make sure that either deliveries or caregivers or families visiting people in the building are not using the street to park? And that's kind of a tough issue. So I'm disappointed that at this point those plans aren't a little firmer. And I will say that I find it hard to believe that seniors will want to walk 3 blocks to E2 for parking. I found that hard to believe originally, and I still find that hard to believe now. Obviously, there is parking capacity. The question is it where people will use it? And will it minimize the impact on the community, which is the main concern? And that's that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other commissioners have thoughts they'd like to share?
Just a comment question on that. What I read is that there were 90 spaces available at the link, which is more than enough to meet the requirement. So if those spaces are taken at the link, there's no need to go to E2. Maybe I misunderstood, but that's what I read. So.
Yes, I think the question is the agreement with E2 or the link, or both? That's the question.
I will share some information that I received from staff today. The link has submitted a zoning analysis for their new project. And so I think that parking there will become much more difficult based on their plans for this new area this new thing that they are planning on building. It's called a tower. I don't know what it is. I've not seen drawings of it. I've just got a text message that says it will be adding 200 dwelling units and 71 additional parking spaces, leading the whole complex at the link to have, and again, this is zoning analysis, so these are not final plans, so this all can change. 441 dwelling units, 721 bedrooms, 231 parking spaces total. So I don't know that I would rely on the link to be the source, but that again is up to the link and what they want to negotiate. But I would be very disappointed if they gave away their parking spaces and then came to us and cried, we don't have enough parking spaces. So that's my only concern on that. Just in response to what Commissioner Halleck had to say. Commissioner Johnson, any thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I'm all right at this time.
Okay, Commissioner Huco?
Yeah, usually complaints we get about building height are too high. This is lowering the height of the buildings. I think people should be, those that are concerned about building height should be applauding that. Similarly for decreasing number of units, people complain about density and congestion, and this is decreasing the number of units, so people should be happy with that. It probably makes the economics of the deal a little more difficult because they're keeping the affordable unit numbers the same, which I applaud. But that's really, I think, for the developer and for the banks and to figure out the economic impact. And we get down to parking, and I think Commissioner Westerberg raises some good questions. But I think for me, if the residents in the Emerson aren't able to get on-street parking permits, then I suspect that does diminish somewhat the concern that they'll be clogging up the neighborhood. And at the end of the day, I think it's for the people who are going to be leasing the apartments to figure out whether they want to walk to E2 or Link. And if it's too much, they won't do it, and someone else will do it. So, and lease it for whom that is not a concern or difficulty. So I personally don't see a basis on which to deny the applicant's request for these three changes.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll just go ahead and give my general thoughts. I don't think anybody here on the commission is concerned about the height change, which is a lowering, or the unit change, which is a lowering. So it's actually lessening impact from what City Council approved last November. So I don't think that's an issue for anyone, and correct me if I'm wrong. So what it comes down to really is the parking spaces, in which City Council last year approved 37 below grade, and we're now getting a request for 25, which is a change in 12 parking spaces. My personal thoughts are that without the residents being able to get parking permits for the neighborhood, that they will not be able to park in the neighborhood or risk tickets for violating that. I do believe that there is a number of parking spaces available in the area. To find 12 spaces, which is what we seem to be talking about here, from what City Council approved on the below grade, so finding an additional 12 spaces somewhere. So I really don't have a major problem with this amendment to the plan development. And so those are sort of my thoughts on it. Is there a motion for this? And then we will go through our standards and discuss. But if there's a motion on this, I will entertain that at this time. Is there someone willing to do that, or should I word it and then someone will say so moved?
Okay, I'll make the motion. I move to that we approve the amendment as stated, with the condition that that caregivers parking will be paid for also as stated.
And before there's a second on that, how would you feel about requiring an additional 12 spaces to be secured somewhere else off-site?
Yes, add that also. That's fine.
So with that, is there a second?
I'll second.
So it's been moved by Halleck, seconded by Huco. Any discussion? I'm sorry, any discussion about that? Or if not, we'll just go through standards. This is going to be tricky because normally the standards go up on screen, which is where everybody else is. So I'm going to kind of
Yeah,
move.
I can share the screen.
Okay.
Share my screen and have
Thank
them
you.
come up.
that I can't read that from here. I'm just going to slide over. So the first standard in the special use is it is one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. It is, that standard has been met. Number two, it is in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinances as amended from time to time. Again, we're seeing a lessening of the impact overall on this, but we are seeing a reduction in parking. But I think that we can address that through the motion that has been made by requiring 12 off-site spaces. And it is in keeping with our policies to build our larger buildings in the downtown area. Number three, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types on the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of special use upon the city as a whole. Again, this was approved by City Council last November. We have seen a reduction in the height and number of units involved, which should lessen some of the impact. And I believe by requiring the additional parking spaces off-site to get those additional 12 back that are being lost by this amendment, it should not have an effect, a negative effect on the neighborhood, at least not with the parking permit situation in the neighborhood. It should not be a negative effect. Number four, it does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. I believe this standard has been met. Again, it is providing housing in the downtown area, and therefore I believe that is met. It can be adequately served by public facilities and services. We haven't really heard anything on that, but again, this was approved by City Council last year, and we've not seen any of the requested changes that should have an impact on public facilities and services, so I believe that is met. It will not cause undue traffic congestion. Again, we were talking about parking, not with traffic, so I believe that standard is fine because it's not been changed from what City Council approved last year. It preserves significant historical and architectural resources. We've not heard any testimony related to that, so I believe that standard is fine. Number eight, it preserves significant natural and environmental features. There is nothing here that is trying to be preserved. Actually, we're lessening the footprint or the impact of the building on the land, so I believe that standard is met. And number nine, it complies with all applicable regulations of the district in which it is located and other applicable ordinances, except to the extent such regulations have been modified through the plan development process or the grant of a variation. Obviously, this is a plan development, and we are amending the plan development, which is totally within the process, so that standard has been met. So is everyone in agreement with my finding on standards, or is there someone who would like to voice an alternate opinion on one of them?
I think I would argue that it can cause a negative effect if the parking is not handled appropriately. So I think that's a little iffy at this point because I think the parking plan still isn't gelled enough to answer that.
All right, thank you. So that's standard number three. Any other comments on the standards for special use? If not, we'll move on to the next set of standards, which are standards for a plan development. As a special use, plan development involves such special considerations of the public interest that will be required to adhere to the specific plan development standards established in the zoning district in which it is located. Compliance with the standards shall govern the recommendations of the plan commissions applicable to applicable to a plan development and the action of the City Council in order to ensure that the approved plan development is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. The Plan Commission shall not recommend approval of, nor shall the City Council approve a plan development unless each shall determine based on written findings of fact that the plan development satisfies the specific standards established in the zoning district in which the plan development is located. Again, that's very long, but the fact that we are actually seeing a reduction in two of the requests, which were the height and the number of units, creates, those actually lessen the impact again. We're again talking about these 12 additional parking spaces that will be lost and regaining those somewhere. And I believe that that can be done through the agreements that would be hopefully in place before this goes to City Council. So that, I believe that that standard has been met. Are there more to this? And then the standards and guidelines for plan developments in a C1A district. Number one, each plan development shall be compatible with surrounding development and shall not be of nature in height, bulk, or scale to exercise any influence contrary to the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinances set forth in section 612, purpose and intent. Again, we are seeing a lessening of bulk and size and scale in this project. Although the height is only reducing by 4 feet roughly, we are seeing a change in the number of units, therefore reducing its use, and I believe that that standard has been met. Each plan development shall be compatible with and implement the adopted comprehensive general plan as amended, any adopted land use or urban design plan specific to the area, this zoning ordinance, and any other pertinent city planning and development policies. Again, we're talking about amending a project that was approved last year. I believe that standard has been met. Each plan development shall be completed within 2 years of the issuance of a special use permit for the plan development. I don't know exactly where we are in the process on that, but I believe we're 1 year in, roughly, based on their approval being last November.
Yes, they are in for an extension.
Okay.
Of the original approval in order to get a building permit, so this is part of that.
All right. So this is met at this time. No special use permit for a planned development shall be valid for a period longer than 1 year unless a building permit is issued. Again, this standard will be met if they get their applications in, if they get their extensions as requested. All landscape treatment within the plan development shall be provided in accordance with the requirements set forth in Chapter 17, landscaping and screening, and shown on the required landscape plan that shall be submitted as part of the plan development application. Again, all of that was recorded last year, and we are asked, there are no changes being requested for this year. So that standard is met. And one last, hopefully, standards and guidelines for plan developments in the C1 district under site controls and standards. For all boundaries of the plan development abutting a residential property, there shall be provided a transition landscape barrier or landscape strip of at least 10 feet consisting of vegetative screening, fencing, and decorative walls in accordance with the Manual of Design Guidelines. Again, we're not here to discuss the landscaping. That was something that was addressed last year. So that standard is met. Walkways developed for a planned development shall form a logical, safe, and convenient system for pedestrian access to all project facilities and off-site destinations likely to attract substantial pedestrian traffic. Pedestrian ways shall not be used by other automotive traffic. Again, this is one that has been addressed in last year, and we're not being asked to look at that this year. The location, construction, and operation of parking, loading areas, and service areas shall be designed to avoid adverse effects on residential uses within or adjoining the development, and where possible, provide additional parking beyond that required for the planned development to service the business district in which it is located. Again, parking seems to be the thing that we are talking about most here. City Council last year did approve this with a requirement of only 37 underground parking spaces. We're being asked to look at 25, and I believe with us making a condition that 12 additional parking spaces be found, that standard will be met. Number 4, principal vehicular access points shall be designed to permit smooth traffic flow with controlled turning movements and a minimum hazards to vehicular or pedestrian traffic. I don't believe that there has been any change to any of the access points for the for the parking and traffic flow, so that standard is met. The planned development shall provide, if possible, for underground installation of utilities, including electricity and telephone, both in public ways and private extensions thereof. Again, this was addressed in the ordinance that was created last year and is not something we're being asked to amend, so that standard is met. For every planned development, there shall be provided a market feasibility statement. The plan development last year, I'm assuming, did have a market feasibility statement made, and nothing is being asked to be changed on that, really, so I believe that that standard is met. For every plan development, there shall be provided a traffic circulation impact study. Again, the traffic flow patterns, the traffic circulation are not something that we're being asked to address this year. It was handled under ordinance last year, and so I believe that standard is met. And the zoning administrator may, at her discretion, require of the applicant additional studies or impact analyses when she determines that a reasonable need for such investigation is indicated. The zoning administrator, to my knowledge, has not requested any of these things, so I believe that standard is met. Is that all of the standards?
That is it.
All right, I'm going to go back to my seat. Were there any other standards that I went through? I'm sorry I didn't stop and ask if commissioners had any issue with any of those other standards before we look to move and take a vote. Anyone? If not, then I will call the vote that we are being asked to, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the following site development allowances: a decrease in the number of dwelling units from 168 to 152, a decrease in the number of below-grade parking spaces from 37 to 25, and a decrease in zoning height from 172 feet 8 inches to 168 4 inches, with the additional conditions that 12 additional parking spaces be located to offset the 12 that are being lost in the underground facility, and that caregivers, there be a, I'm sorry, Mr. Halleck, I don't remember exactly how you worded it, that caregivers be...
That parking for the caregivers will be paid for if requested by the operator.
By HACC.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So that is the motion before us. Will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Halleck?
Yes.
Commissioner Hugo?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
No.
With a vote of 4-1, the project will move forward to City Council with a recommendation for approval. I would encourage everyone who came and spoke with us and wanted to raise additional issues beyond our purview to feel free to address those at City Council, who has more latitude in addressing issues and can make recommendations back to us if there are things that they have concerns about. But that is our finding, that we are recommending approval on a 4-1 vote. Is there any other public comment to be had this evening? If you just raise your hand, are there any hands up?
There are not.
With that, then I will ask if there is a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Moved by Halleck, seconded by Westerberg, and I don't believe we need a roll call vote on that. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.